interruption. So as I was saying, we've identified three different design themes, which are sustainable design, inclusive design, and community participation. And I will be talking about two examples of housing in which these principles have been applied, either all the three of them or at least one of the elements have been applied in reality. So what is contemporary housing in definition? We raise some questions to ourselves. How do we define? Because before you start doing a literature review, you need to have a definition of what you're looking for in the literature. So what is contemporary housing? So we think, we ask questions, is it a civic type of housing? Is it a social housing? Or is it vernacular architecture? So these are just theoretical questions that we put forward before we started doing the literature review. And the result of the literature review gave us, this is a snapshot of the result of the literature review, which is basically telling us that one of the most important issues in contemporary housing today in Europe is the energy performance of the houses. Obviously, there are some other issues, like you can see, the air quality, the heating, and other issues are very important. But energy seems to be one of the major problems or issues that needs to be resolved or solved in housing provision today in Europe. There is an EU directive, the Energy Performance in Building Directive, that addresses energy performance of buildings generally in Europe. However, there is no EU-level definition for contemporary housing. But as a result of the previously shown literature review result, we came up with this definition of contemporary housing, which is basically means a satisfaction of the needs of the present occupants. And at the same time, is a contemporary housing to satisfy the needs of the present occupants while being environmentally sustainable. It should be responsive, socially responsive, and at the same time, it should be affordable. Contemporary housing is not a static thing; it is dynamic, which means that it is always continuously adapting to the needs of its occupants. And I won't go into the history of how it evolved, but we know that literature shows that it's something that started in most parts of Europe after the Second World War. And these issues currently shaping the contemporary housing provision today are things like resource efficiency, which is one of the main flagship strategy in Europe for the Europe 2020 strategy in Europe, and other issues shaping contemporary housing, demographic trends, the living arrangements today in Europe. So these three principles of design principles have been identified, as I said earlier, which is sustainable design, inclusive design, and community participation. And I will go through these design principles one by one. The first one, which is sustainable design principle, has 3 or 4 elements. We have the cradle-to-cradle design principle, the ecosystemic design concept. We have the compact building design concept and the socio-integrative design concept. Now, what do we mean by each of these? Currently, if you have to build a house, you get the raw materials, you build the house, and at the end of the useful life, the house is demolished, you bury the waste in the ground, and if you need to build another house, you start all over again from start. And we don't need the specialists to tell us that this is not a sustainable form of living because the building materials are not being reused. So we need to look for a more sustainable way. So the cradle-to-cradle design is opposed to what we currently, or in most places we do today, which is cradle-to-grave, in which we bury resources into ground. Instead of that, we're looking for a cradle-to-cradle, which means that at the end of the useful life, the building materials can be reused, and we don't waste resources as a result. So that is one design concept that was identified in literature. This requires thinking in the life cycle setting, which means you need to consider all the energies that goes into the production of the materials, the building materials, how the building materials together come to be a unit, to work as a unit form, in which energy is reduced to the minimum that is possible during when the house is being inhabited. And at the end of the useful life, as I said earlier, the building materials, if possible, you should be able to reuse them, and if not possible, you should be able to recycle them and use them for other purposes instead of disposing of these building materials. The sustainable design, in summary, as I said earlier, is looking at the life impact assessment of the building throughout its lifetime. The building materials must be sourced from sustainable sources. The building technology must allow for the construction of the building at the end of its useful life, as opposed to demolition, in which case you'll have to bury the building materials in the ground. The second type of design principle concept we have is the ecosystemic design concept, in which case the design concept will look at the relationship between the occupants, the building, and the environment. It assumes that there is a mutual benefit for all these factors in the system. That's on the one side. On the other side, it's more designed for natural equilibrium, which means that if you're having a new housing in a new environment, for example, the biodiversity in that environment should be maintained as much as possible. So you're creating a built environment, but you should also consider the natural environment, and there should be no disruption to the natural equilibrium in the newly established or created environment. The third sustainable design concept that was identified is the compact building design concept. It is usually applied, or should be applied, in urban development. It takes into consideration economics of scale, meaning you're housing a lot of people in one unit, in one area. But also there are issues here, which means there will be reduced access to green areas. Privacy and socialization is always an issue. Community identity is a problem, and it is also a source of social conflict, usually. And the design can help to reduce some of the problems we can experience in this type of design concept. The fourth design concept under sustainable design is the social integrative design concept, which mainly identifies the needs of an individual as opposed or compared to the need of the society as a whole, and how these two can work together to form a harmonious relationship. The second type of design theme that we identified in literature is the inclusive design, which is, as you probably know, is a design for accessible built environment. And I will be going through these items. What do we need to know about it? The principle, the tools, and the context in which inclusive design is applied. Inclusive design should not, while it is trying to address accessibility in the built environment for those that have limited mobility, it should not be seen as a stigmatizing factor. It should not stigmatize any user group. The need, why we need inclusive design today, it varies. We have an aging population in Europe. Europe is aging. The median age in Europe is increasing. We have living arrangements today that's probably not existent or not as prevalent about 30 or 40 years ago. We have more and more people living alone, probably never been married, or probably never had children. And as they get older, they are living on their own. We have social status and circumstances to consider, and we have gender and other diverse issues to think about when we're talking about inclusive design. Principles of inclusive design. It means it is an environment that takes into consideration that there should be a minimal effort that is applied by the user. It should offer freedom of access to the user. It must accommodate the individual needs of the people. It must embrace diversity and differences amongst the users. It must be eligible. It must be legible and predictable, so you don't just have maybe a narrow corridor and all of a sudden a wide corridor or the other way around. And it will be flexible for all users and safe to use for all users, irrespective of their age or gender difference. The tools that we can use to achieve inclusive design varies. One of the most popular ones is the post-occupancy evaluation, which is a method of getting to know how a building is performing with respect to the inhabitants, what they think about the building. But we should also appreciate the fact that this method is a retrospective method of assessing the performance of a building. We have the building information modeling system, which visualizes a building even before it is built, so design errors can be easily or better identified before the errors are committed. Context in which inclusive design is used is very important. Context in Slovakia will be different compared to context in the UK. The resources that is used to achieve inclusive design will vary from country to country. So it is very important to know the context in which we're talking about, and the level of the development of a society is also very important to take into consideration when we're talking about inclusive design, depending on which country we're talking about, because of the different levels of development. The third theme that I said, as I said earlier, is the community participation. And community participation is defined by David Inzeta as a decentralization of urban management by spreading decision-making among local entities and community development, community involvement in the development of urban policies. And there are based on this wheel of participation, there are 4 different ways of engaging community in the achievement of this type of design theme or principle. You can empower people, you can use consultation, you can use participation, or you can use information. All of these elements can be applied in various degrees to achieve community participation in a housing project. In a nutshell, a community participation should be thinking in terms of a system, which means if you're trying to have a new project in a new urban setting, you need to consider that there are different elements and different participants, different actors. And this is where it is important to know the roles of all of the actors, public sector, private sector, all working together. And the design principle must try to resolve the various conflicts that might be arising from all these actors. So this is one of the examples that we've identified in Freiburg's district. It involved 300 volunteers participating on the project. So this is a typical community participation project. It was acclaimed by the UN Habitat as one of the German best practice design. It was completed in 1996. The second one is a sustainable community that was built in the UK, completed in 2002. It's a smaller project, but it's one of its kind, the first of its kind in the UK. And it's using 100% renewable energy. So in a nutshell, drivers of contemporary housing today can be divided into 3 different design principles. And these 3 principles are mutually reinforcing, so you shouldn't think of them in isolation. Sustainable design should be thought about in conjunction to inclusive design, and inclusive design should be linked to community participation. None of them should be seen as one design principle that is independent of the other. They should all be working in harmony. And socioeconomic challenges are also important to be noted. Involvement and participation of all stakeholders is important in all of the design principles mentioned, and research and practice can help to achieve contemporary housing. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't go too much of your time. Any questions? Give him more time, please.
I would like to ask about very nice this time graph about contemporary housing in the beginning of your presentation.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And according to this, it was interesting to see that from this perspective, sustainability finished in 2007, and this is now we are out of this sustainable approach. Maybe some
No.
comment.
Well, it should not. I think I tried to draw this in an overlapping way, if you can see. I'm not sure if it is clear there. So it is not a matter of one begins and one end. It is a matter of what is prevalent and what is more of a driver or the driving force behind in a particular period of time. So while sustainability was a theme that started in the early 90s, it is still being discussed today as a driver of contemporary housing. However, we have to understand that the financial crisis we had that started in 2008 is also a sustainability issue. It is one of the problems that has been discussed over time for the past almost 30 years. But we all know about sustainability by now. We all know what the problem of sustainability or the issue around sustainability today. The financial crisis is a more pressing issue. You don't need to tell people about sustainability anymore today. But after the crisis in 2008, it's become more of a dominant issue. It becomes a more political, if I may say, driving force behind the provision of contemporary housing. That is why it is written like this here. But it's not like sustainability is no longer an important issue behind contemporary housing.
Yes, thanks for your presentation. I have a question about rights. To what extent rights have been included in your study, and to what extent rights of people, housing rights, are a driver for contemporary housing. Because you say at the European level there's no housing policy, but at the European level, have the right to adequate housing been ratified, or is this only at the national level that this covenant has been ratified?
Well, in every country is different. The policy that's been applied in countries it varies. What we have in terms of, for example, in the UK, it's more rent support and ownership that is being supported. In some other parts of Europe, it is different. In some Eastern European countries, it's more ownership that is being driven through loans that is supported in part by the government. So different countries will have a different approach to provision of contemporary housing, depending on whatever policy they've chosen to follow. I'm not sure how the right of an individual to have a home, how it is driving contemporary housing. I don't know if it's affecting contemporary housing in the first instance. I think what is more important are the economics and how the policy supports the ability of an individual to have access to home or to a house, to have a contemporary housing. I think that is, I don't know if I answer your question appropriately.
Yeah, the right to adequate housing is adequate housing. That's a definition, and when countries ratify to this covenant, they have to apply. So I was wondering whether at the European level this covenant has also been ratified, or
I
that
wouldn't.
something to explore further.
I wouldn't say no, I don't think it's been rectified because we have different practice in different countries. Even within the same country, there are different practices. So I don't think it is a problem solved today in Europe. That is what you're asking.
Thank you for the presentation. I have the question with the notion of contemporary. It is a kind of, I don't know, something in between. So how do you make contemporary and not contemporary in such senses? Or in the literature, how did you define it while you were making your researches?
Well, contemporary, if you want to take it literally in English, it means modern, or it means current. It means something that is happening now, contemporary. But now, current is also a changing thing, if you know what I mean. It is what is happening now, and probably that is what this timeline is trying to explain, in the sense that the post-war Europe, what was a pressing issue then was to give people houses, because most of the housing stock in Europe was destroyed as a result of the World War. So having quality was not. I think I was reading that the mass housing need was more of an issue. Quantity was a much more important as compared to quality. So contemporary then would not be contemporary now. People more or less have houses. People have access to loan. Banks used to beg people to come and have loan. If you have 10% or 5% in some countries in the UK, if you have 5% of the value of the house, you will be given 95% as a loan. But of course, that has changed a little bit after the crisis. So quality was there. The houses were there for people to buy. So what was contemporary by definition 30, 40 years ago is no longer contemporary today. What we know today is people want to have the liberty, the freedom to live their own contemporary lifestyle today. And I think I have that lifestyle is there as one of the present issues which is dominant today. People have a freedom to live on their own, to live alone. And the living arrangement is very important to people. Many years ago, it was not an issue because you have the normal classic family in Europe. Today, it's normal to be single. It's normal to have a sexual orientation, and everything is much more important. Which is 40 years ago, it was what was a taboo then is no longer a taboo today.
So the related issue of the.
Sorry, can you say I didn't. Yeah.
The housing, which used to be addressed earlier. So in Europe, we do have a European code on the human rights, and they are making decisions for all European countries, having in mind the same legislation, and they are making some changes. And those changes, among those decisions, we are witnessing some process of changes. It is one issue I would like to raise. Another one, in your presentation, I would like to see the housing exposed much more to the new social risks. We do have, among even people which belong to the middle class status, new social risks. Let's say those who are repaying mortgage, being let's say in age of 40s, they are now in bigger risks to lose the job at the job market. And definitely it should be reflecting their housing position. And besides that, having in mind the other topic, having in mind new technology of the IT technology, more and more people from younger generation, they are using home as a working space. It is one new type of the meaning of the housing and the issue related to the contemporary housing evolution.
Yeah, Yeah, thank you. It is a very complimentary comments you've made, all the three of them, which, we need to add to what our definition of contemporary housing is today. For example, as you mentioned, people working from home, it's very common today. It's 40 years ago, you have to go to your office. That's when you go to work. It's very natural for people to work from home today, which is a lifestyle thing, which is one of the things that you need to consider, that you have a small office in your home, and it will define your needs as a result. Yeah. Thank you. We also have people now working from coffee shops. Yeah, it's a new phenomenon. It's becoming very popular, actually. Maria, you have something quickly?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Very interesting. I have a question about this wheel of participation. Because the wheel represents different qualities of participation, different levels of involvement, let's say, of the population into the project or the policy or whatever it is. And I understand from your presentation that you also reviewed several participatory projects in housing. And I would like to know what your impression is about what the quality of participation is nowadays in contemporary housing in the project that you reviewed. Where in the wheel should we place the existing community participation in housing?
Well, yeah. Well, that's one. I think that's the toughest question I'm getting today. um, oh, it's just the beginning. In terms of the level of participation, what I'm trying to say with this wheel of participation is just to see the various level of participation depending on which of the quadrats you're looking at. It doesn't mean that one excludes, these are not exclusive elements, they are complementary, right? So you don't think of empower as opposed to inform, you think of empower and inform and consult and participate all together. The question is, depending on the setting and the context where this idea is being, actually it's one of our colleagues at UCLan, I think, is our colleague here, that came up with this idea, I think, or we borrowed it from him. Anyway, it is not, one is not exclusive of the other. That's what I'm trying to say. It is a matter of, depending on the setting and where you're using these ideas. For example, if you take inform, for example, it ranges from minimal communication to high quality communication. So in a community where, either people are highly informed, they know a lot about their environment, as a result, they might need high quality information, because if you give them just basic information, you're not really doing much because of the high level, the content and the quality of the information that they already have. So giving them basic minimal communication or information is not going to help their participation in this so-called wheel of participation. If I take another example here, which is consult, for example, and it's looking at genuine consultation as opposed, if you're talking of opposed here, to limited consultation. So are you really having a consultation with the community in the project? Or you just informing more or less? We call it consultation, but you're just giving information. You're not really interested in their own, in the engagement of the community. So it will depend, and as I said earlier, it will depend on the country you're using, or even the community you are applying this, the wheel of participation in, what will be applicable in Riga might not be applicable in Bratislava. we shall move on. Thank you very much, Isaiah. That's been great. Shall I put you again?